Imagine India before DNA tests or fingerprinting, where justice relied on tradition, community, and religious law. The arrival of the British East India Company sparked a quiet revolution. Science entered the courtroom. The British introduced forensic methods, shifting justice from oral testimony to scientific evidence. This wasn't a simple swap of old for new, but a complex collision of cultures and ideas. The British aimed to create a uniform legal system, building courts, police, and laboratories to serve the empire's interests. Forensic science became a tool of control, promising objectivity and order. Traditional justice valued reputation and community. The British prized verifiable facts. We'll explore how these worlds clashed and merged, visiting the first labs and meeting the pioneers who shaped modern Indian forensics. From poisonings in rural villages to food adulteration in colonial cities, forensic science transformed the pursuit of truth. This is the story of how chemical traces, not just words, began to decide guilt and innocence. Let's step back in time to witness the birth of a new kind of detective work. Before British rule, India's justice system was a patchwork of local customs, religious laws, and community councils. Mughal courts used Sharia law, focusing on witness testimony and moral character. Hindu systems relied on ancient texts and village panchayats, aiming for social harmony over punishment. Justice was personal, rooted in oral tradition and reputation. Physical evidence was rare. Truth emerged from dialogue and consensus. Some communities even used trial by ordeal, trusting divine intervention over human investigation. There were no detectives or scientific analysis. Justice was seen as cosmic order, not empirical fact. This system worked for centuries in close-knit communities, but seemed unpredictable to the British. The British saw it as inconsistent and incompatible with their vision of a modern state. This fundamental difference in legal philosophy set the stage for a dramatic transformation. The introduction of Western forensic science would soon upend these age-old traditions. The British needed a uniform, controllable legal system to govern India's vast diversity. They found local courts chaotic and witness testimony unreliable, especially across language and cultural barriers. Science promised objectivity, evidence that didn't depend on social standing or persuasion. Forensic methods became essential for British judges who distrusted traditional testimony. Introducing science was also an act of imperial ideology, a gift of modernity meant to replace superstition. Forensic labs were established to provide hard evidence, reinforcing British authority in the courtroom. The stage was set for a new era of crime detection in colonial India. The first Chemical Examiners Laboratory opened in Calcutta in 1849. Marking a turning point. Soon, labs followed in Madras 1853 and Bombay 1870, forming a network across British India. These labs focused on toxicology, detecting poisons in a land where such crimes were common. Staffed by British chemists and surgeons, they adapted European techniques to India's unique challenges. They trained local assistants, building a new scientific infrastructure from scratch. Lab reports became powerful courtroom evidence, often outweighing witness testimony. These institutions symbolized the authority of science and the colonial state. The chemical examiners were not just scientists, they were innovators, educators, and agents of a new order. Their work laid the foundation for forensic science in India. Poisoning was rampant in 19th century India, often used in disputes and crimes. Chemical examiners' main task was to detect these poisons, using tests like the Marsh test for arsenic. Viscera from suspected victims traveled long distances to labs, where chemists painstakingly analyzed them. Their reports could make or break a case, providing the crucial evidence for conviction. Beyond murder, labs tackled food and drug adulteration, exposing dangerous practices in colonial markets. They tested ghee, milk, spices, and more, protecting public health and enforcing new regulations. Their expertise extended to bloodstains, counterfeit coins, and arson investigations. The labs became versatile tools for the colonial state, applying chemistry to crime, health, and revenue. Forensic science brought an invisible world of evidence into the light. Early forensic scientists faced daunting challenges. India's vastness meant evidence often arrived at labs spoiled by heat and time. Underfunded and understaffed, labs struggled to keep up with demand. Scientific investigation was reserved for the most serious crimes. Many cases still relied on tradition. In court, expert reports could be challenged by defense lawyers, who questioned methods and contamination. Judges and lawyers often lacked scientific literacy, forcing chemists to become skilled communicators. Cultural resistance was strong, autopsies were taboo, and police were poorly trained in evidence collection. Contamination at crime scenes was common, undermining investigations. Building trust in forensic science required patience and cross-cultural understanding. These pioneers weren't just scientists, they were bridge builders between worlds. Their persistence slowly established science as a credible force in Indian justice. Forensic science transformed Indian justice, shifting focus from reputation to physical proof. Scientific reports became impartial witnesses, raising standards for conviction. Chemical examiners' work improved public health, driving new regulations against food and drug adulteration. However, forensic science also reinforced colonial power, giving the state an edge in court. The state's access to labs created a power imbalance, sometimes silencing dissent. The integration of medicine and law created a new class of medico-legal experts. Doctors became key players in justice, conducting autopsies and bridging two worlds. These changes laid the groundwork for modern forensic medicine in India. The legacy is both one of progress and of power. Colonial forensics planted the seeds for India's modern system. The Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay labs set a precedent for future growth. In 1897, Calcutta saw the world's first fingerprint bureau, an Indian innovation that changed global policing. New departments for serology and ballistics followed, and Indian scientists gained advanced training. Forensic science expanded from chemistry to a multidisciplinary field. The legacy is complex. It brought objectivity and accountability, but also served colonial interests. Understanding this history reveals how science, law, and power are always intertwined. The search for truth in India's courts was forever changed by the forensic revolution.